Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to English in Fluency. I am so happy to see you here again. I am Alex, your host, and today we have a really fantastic lesson planned that is going to take your English listening skills to the next level while helping you become a much more supportive and understanding friend. Have you ever been in a situation where someone comes to you with a problem? Maybe they are feeling sad or confused, and they ask you what they should do. You want to help them, right? You want to give them good advice, but sometimes it is hard to find the right words, or maybe you are worried about sounding too bossy or too direct. Well, today we are going to solve that problem together. We are going to focus on B1 English listening practice, specifically looking at how to understand and use advice-giving language. This is going to be so useful for your real life, whether you are talking to friends, colleagues, or even family members. We are going to listen to some helpful conversations, break them down, and learn exactly how to follow them easily and naturally. So, get comfortable. Maybe grab a cup of tea or coffee. And let's dive right into the world of giving and receiving advice in English. To start, I want you to think about how we give advice in English. It is not just about saying, do this or do that. That can sound a little bit too strong sometimes, can't it? In natural, fluent English, we often use softer phrases to make our suggestions sound more friendly and helpful. We use phrases like, you should, why don't you? It might be a good idea to, or if I were you. These are the keys to sounding polite and kind. Today, we are going to follow 3 different stories involving 3 different pairs of people who are dealing with common life problems. I want you to listen closely to how they speak to each other. Notice the tone of their voices and pay attention to the specific phrases they use when they are trying to help one another. Don't worry if you don't understand every single word immediately. Just try to get the general feeling and the main idea, and then I will explain everything in detail afterwards. Let's begin with our first story. We have 2 friends, Sarah and Tom. They have known each other for years, and they are sitting in a quiet coffee shop on a rainy afternoon. Sarah looks a little bit tired, and she is stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. She has a problem at work, and she needs Tom's perspective. Listen to how Tom introduces his advice without being pushy. Sarah takes a deep breath, and she looks at Tom, telling him that she is really thinking about quitting her job because she feels so bored and unappreciated. She says she hates waking up in the morning because she dreads going into the office. Now, listen to how Tom responds. He doesn't just say, "Quit your job," immediately. Instead, he leans forward and he says, "That sounds really tough, Sarah. I'm sorry you're feeling that way. But before you make a big decision, why don't you talk to your manager first? Maybe you can change your projects or get more responsibility." Did you hear that? Tom acknowledged her feelings first, which is so important. And then he used the phrase, "Why don't you?" This is a classic, gentle way to suggest an action. It feels like a friendly nudge rather than a command. Sarah sighs and shakes her head. She explains that she has tried talking to her manager before, but nothing really changed. She feels stuck. Tom listens patiently, and then he tries a different approach. He says, "I see. Well, if I were you, I would start looking for other jobs while you are still employed. It is always safer to have a job before you leave one." Here, Tom uses "if I were you" I would. This is a great structure for giving personal advice. It puts yourself in the other person's shoes, which makes the advice feel less like an order and more like a shared perspective. Sarah looks up and she seems to relax a little bit. She realizes that Tom is right. She agrees that looking for a new job secretly might be the best step. Tom smiles and adds, "You could also update your LinkedIn profile this weekend. It might be a good idea to see what is out there." He uses "you could" and "it might be a good idea." These are very soft, open suggestions that give Sarah the freedom to choose. By the end of their conversation, Sarah feels much lighter because she has a plan. She thanks Tom, and they finish their coffee with a smile. This conversation shows us that good advice is often a mix of empathy and gentle suggestions. Now, let's move on to our second story. This time we have a brother and sister, Emily and Jason. Emily has just moved into a new apartment, but she is having a lot of trouble with her neighbor. The neighbor plays loud music late at night, and Emily cannot sleep. She is very frustrated, and she calls Jason on the phone to complain. As you listen, notice how Jason calms her down and offers practical solutions. Emily is speaking fast, and she sounds angry. She says she wants to call the police or go bang on the neighbor's door right now. Jason, being the calm one, tells her to take a breath. He says, "Emily, I know you are angry, but you shouldn't do anything impulsive. It might make the situation worse." The phrase here is, "you shouldn't." It is direct but necessary because he is warning her against a bad action. He is protecting her. Emily takes a breath and admits that she is just so tired. Jason then suggests, "Why don't you write a polite note first? Sometimes people don't realize they are being loud." Again, we see, "Why don't you?" but in a different context. Emily thinks about it and says that a note is a good idea, but she is worried the neighbor won't read it. Jason replies, "Okay, well, if it were me, I would try knocking on their door tomorrow morning when you are calm. You could just introduce yourself and mention the noise nicely." Notice the phrase, "if it were me," which is a slight variation of "if I were you." It is very conversational. He also says, "You could just introduce yourself." Adding the word "just" makes it sound like a simple, easy task. Emily agrees that talking face-to-face is probably better than an angry note. Jason reassures her by saying, "You've got this. Just be polite, and I am sure they will understand." This encouragement is part of giving advice, too. It makes the person feel confident enough to take the action. By the end of the call, Emily feels calm and ready to handle the situation maturely. Let's go to our third story for this section. We have two colleagues, Lisa and Chris. They work together in a busy office, and they are taking a short break in the hallway. Lisa has a big presentation coming up next week, and she is terrified of public speaking. Her hands are shaking a little bit, and she tells Chris that she wants to call in sick just to avoid it. Chris is a more experienced speaker, and he has some very helpful advice. Listen to how he encourages her. Lisa confesses that she is afraid she will forget her words and embarrass herself in front of everyone. Chris laughs kindly and says, "Lisa, everyone gets nervous. You shouldn't worry so much. Actually, the more you practice, the more confident you will feel." He starts with, "You shouldn't worry," which is advice about her emotional state, not just her actions. Then he suggests a practical step. He says, "It might help if you practice in front of a mirror tonight. You could also record yourself on your phone to hear how you sound. Lisa looks skeptical. She says recording herself sounds scary and uncomfortable. Chris nods and says, I understand, but if I were in your shoes, I would do it. It really helps you see where you need to slow down. The phrase, if I were in your shoes, is another excellent idiom for giving advice. It means, if I were in your situation. Lisa agrees to try it, but she asks what she should do if she blanks out during the real presentation. Chris has a great answer for that. He says, you could have a small card with key points written on it. Just hold it and look at it if you get stuck. No one will mind. He uses you could to offer a specific tool to help her anxiety. Lisa smiles and thanks Chris. She says that having a plan makes her feel much better. Chris pats her on the shoulder and says, you will be great. Just remember to breathe. This simple piece of advice is often the most important. Now that we have listened to these 3 conversations, I want to take a moment to review the language we heard. You probably noticed that there were several key phrases that appeared again and again. We heard, why don't you, which is a gentle suggestion. We heard, you should and you shouldn't, which are stronger but very common pieces of advice. We heard, if I were you and if I were in your shoes, which are personal and empathetic ways to give advice. We also heard, you could, which is a soft way to offer an option, and it might be a good idea to, which is very polite and formal but still easy to use. When you are listening to someone give advice, try to catch these phrases. They act like signposts. When you hear, why don't you, you know a suggestion is coming. When you hear, you shouldn't, you know it is a warning. Let's practice a little bit right now. Imagine you have a friend who says to you, I want to get fit, but I hate going to the gym. What would you say to them? You could use the language we just learned. You might say, why don't you try hiking instead? It is fun and free. Or perhaps you would say, if I were you, I would join a sports team. It is a good way to meet people. Or maybe, it might be a good idea to buy a bike and cycle to work. See how easy it is? There are so many ways to help your friends without sounding like you are telling them what to do. The goal is to be helpful and kind. I want to encourage you to listen to English conversations around you as much as possible. Maybe you watch English movies or TV shows. Next time you watch, pay attention to when the characters give each other advice. Is it gentle? Is it forceful? Are they using should or could? You will start to see that real-life English is full of these interactions. We are always asking our friends for help, whether it is about what to wear, what to eat, or how to fix a problem. Mastering this listening skill will make you feel much more connected to the language. Let's imagine one more quick scenario just to solidify what we have learned. Imagine a student named Mark is talking to his teacher, Mrs. Green. Mark is failing his math class, and he doesn't know what to do. He tells Mrs. Green that he finds the subject too hard, and he wants to drop the course. Mrs. Green listens carefully. She says, Mark, I understand you are struggling, but you shouldn't give up yet. You are a smart student. She validates him first. Then she says, why don't you come to my after-school class on Tuesdays? We can go over the basics together. She offers a specific solution. Mark thinks about it and says he is busy on Tuesdays. Mrs. Green doesn't give up. She says, okay, well, it might be a good idea to find a study partner. Maybe you can study with a friend on the weekends. She offers an alternative. Mark agrees to find a friend to study with. Mrs. Green adds, "If I were you, I would also try to do 10 extra problems every night. Practice makes perfect." Mark nods and thanks her. He feels like there is a path forward now. This is exactly the kind of helpful conversation we want you to be able to follow easily. So, to summarize what we have looked at so far, giving and understanding advice is all about tone and choice of words. If you want to be polite, use could or why don't you. If you want to be personal, use if I were you. If you want to be strong or serious, use should or shouldn't. And always remember to listen to the other person's problem first before you jump in with your solution. In English culture, and in many others, empathy is just as important as the actual advice. When you listen to these conversations, try to hear the empathy. Is the person saying, "That sounds hard," or "I am sorry to hear that"? These phrases build trust before the advice is given. I really hope that you are ready to dig a little deeper, because we are going to continue with some new situations where the advice is a little bit more specific, maybe a bit more urgent, or perhaps more tentative. We will also look at how people respond to advice, which is just as important as giving it. So, let's jump right back in with another realistic scenario. Imagine we are in a busy clothing store. It is Saturday afternoon, and there are people everywhere. We meet two friends, Mia and Sophie. Mia is holding up a bright red jacket. She loves it, but she is hesitating because it is quite expensive and she isn't sure if it suits her. She asks Sophie for her opinion. This is a very common situation, right? Asking for fashion advice. Listen to how Sophie handles it. Mia asks, "Do you think I should buy this jacket? It costs a lot of money." Sophie doesn't just say yes or no immediately. She looks at the jacket and says, "Well, it looks great on you, but have you thought about checking the sale rack first? There might be something similar there for a lower price." Did you catch that phrase? Have you thought about? This is a fantastic phrase for advice because it is very open. It sounds like a friendly question rather than a command. It shows respect for the other person's decision-making process. Mia shakes her head and says she didn't see anything on the sale rack. Sophie continues, "If I were you, I would wait for a few days. You don't want to spend all your money on one thing if you have bills to pay next week." Here, Sophie is giving practical financial advice using the structure we practiced earlier, but adding a reason. She adds the because or if clause to make the advice stronger. Mia bites her lip and admits that Sophie is right about the money. Then, Sophie offers a compromise. She says, "Why don't you take a photo of it and look at it again tomorrow? Sometimes if you sleep on it, you realize you don't actually need it." Sleep on it is a wonderful idiom that means to wait and make a decision later. Mia smiles and agrees that is a smart plan. She puts the jacket back and thanks Sophie for stopping her from making a rash decision. This shows how good friends help us save money and think clearly. Now let's switch gears to a health and lifestyle conversation. This time we have two colleagues, David and Ben. They are in the office kitchen making tea. David looks very tired, and he is drinking his third cup of coffee. He tells Ben that he feels exhausted all the time, and he can't seem to wake up in the mornings. Ben is a fitness enthusiast, and he immediately has some ideas. Listen to how Ben introduces his advice without sounding like a doctor. Ben says, David, you look exhausted. To be honest, you really ought to get more sleep. Drinking so much coffee isn't helping. The phrase here is, you really ought to. Ought to is a slightly more formal way to say should, but it is still very common in British and American English when you want to sound serious but caring. It carries a bit more weight than just you should. David sighs and says he knows he needs sleep, but he has trouble falling asleep. Ben nods and leans in closer. He says, in that case, you should try turning off your phone an hour before bed. The light keeps your brain awake. This is direct advice using should, but it is backed by a logical reason. David looks skeptical and says he likes to read the news on his phone before bed. Ben laughs and says, I know, I do too. But you could try reading a book instead. It really helps you relax. And you might feel better if you stop drinking coffee after lunchtime. Notice how Ben mixes you could try with you might feel better. He is offering multiple options. He isn't just ordering David to do one thing. He is giving him a menu of choices. David agrees to try the book idea. Ben encourages him by saying, it might be hard for the first few days, but stick with it. You will thank me later. This kind of encouragement is vital. It reminds the person that change takes time. Let's move on to a scenario involving travel planning. We have a couple, Rachel and Emma, who are planning their summer holiday. They are sitting at their kitchen table with a laptop open, looking at flights. Rachel is stressed because she wants to go to a famous city. But Emma is worried about the crowds and the high prices. They are having a small disagreement, and they need to find a middle ground. Listen to how they use advice language to negotiate. Rachel says, I really want to go to Paris, but the hotels are so expensive. What do you think we should do? Emma thinks for a moment and says, well, we could go in September instead of August. It is cheaper and less crowded. Emma uses we could, which is a great way to make a suggestion that feels like a team effort. Rachel likes that idea, but says she is worried about the weather in September. Emma responds, that is true. But why don't we look at apartments instead of hotels? We can cook our own food, which will save us a lot of money. Again, why don't we? Is a classic suggestion structure. Rachel nods and starts typing on the laptop. She says, okay, that sounds like a plan. Maybe we should also look for flights on Tuesday. They are usually cheaper. See how Rachel joins in with, maybe we should? They are working together using the same language. This conversation shows that advice giving isn't always one person telling the other person what to do. Often, it is a collaborative process where both people use these phrases to solve a problem together. By the end, they are both happy and excited about the trip, all because they used polite and constructive language. I want to take a moment to focus on how we respond to advice, because listening to the response is a big part of understanding the conversation. If someone gives you advice, you have to react. You might accept it, or you might reject it. Let's listen to a short interaction between an uncle and his nephew. The uncle, Arthur, is talking to his nephew, Liam. Liam wants to drop out of university to start a rock band. Arthur is worried. Arthur says, Liam, I know you love music, but you really ought to finish your degree first. It is important to have a backup plan. That is strong advice. Now, listen to how Liam rejects it politely. He doesn't say, no, that is stupid. He says, I appreciate your concern, Uncle Arthur, and I hear what you are saying. However, I feel like this is my only chance to follow my dream. If I don't try now, I will regret it forever." Did you hear how Liam handled that? He started with, "I appreciate your concern," and "I hear what you are saying." This shows he listened and respects the advice. Then he used "however" to gently introduce his disagreement. This is high-level, polite conversation. If you are listening to a conversation and you hear "however" or "I see your point, but," you know the person is about to reject the advice politely. It is important to understand these cues so you don't get confused. If Arthur just heard the "but," he knows his advice wasn't taken. But because Liam was polite, Arthur isn't angry. He accepts Liam's decision. Let's try another response scenario. Imagine two friends, Jenny and Chloe. Jenny is complaining about her roommate being messy. Chloe says, "You should tell her to clean up. It isn't fair to you." Jenny listens and thinks about it. She responds, "You are right. I guess I have been too shy to say anything. I will talk to her tonight." Here, Jenny accepts the advice. She says, "You are right, and I will talk to her." When you are listening, phrases like, "You are right," "That is a good idea," or "I think I will do that," signal that the advice was accepted and the conversation is moving toward a solution. It is a positive moment in the dialogue. Now, let's look at a slightly more serious situation involving a neighbor named Mr. Henderson and a younger neighbor, Sam. Sam's car has broken down, and he is stressed because he needs it for work. Mr. Henderson is an older, experienced man who knows a lot about cars. They are standing on the street looking at the open hood of Sam's car. Sam says he doesn't know what to do, and he thinks he needs to buy a new car. Mr. Henderson looks at the engine and shakes his head. He says, "Don't be silly, Sam. You had better not buy a new car yet. This looks like a simple fix." Listen to that phrase. You had better not. This is had better. It is used to give strong advice or a warning. It implies that something bad will happen if you don't follow the advice. In this case, the bad thing would be wasting money on a new car. Sam looks at Mr. Henderson with hope. He asks what he should do. Mr. Henderson says, "I suggest you go to the auto parts store and buy a new battery." It is probably just that. "I suggest" is another very clear way to give advice. It is professional and clear. Sam thanks him and says he will go right now. Mr. Henderson adds, "Make sure you ask the shop assistant to check your old battery first. You don't want to buy a new one if you don't need it." Make sure is used when you want to give advice about being careful or remembering a specific detail. It is a very common phrase in instructional advice. Sam agrees, closes the hood, and drives carefully to the store. He feels relieved because he received clear, expert advice that saved him money. We have covered so many different phrases today, from the gentle, "Why don't you?" to the strong, "You had better." But I want to remind you that the tone of voice is just as important as the words. If I say, "You should call him," with an angry voice, it sounds like an order. But if I say it softly, with a smile in my voice, it sounds like helpful support. When you are practicing your listening, try to hear the emotion in the speaker's voice. Are they worried? Are they happy? Are they serious? This context will help you understand if the advice is a strong warning or just a friendly tip. Let's do a quick mental exercise together to keep your mind active. I want you to visualize a situation. Your best friend tells you that they want to learn how to cook, but they are afraid of using the oven. What is the first piece of advice that pops into your head? Maybe you think they should start with simple recipes like salads. Or maybe, why don't they watch a cooking video on YouTube first? Or perhaps, if I were them, I would take a beginner's cooking class. All of these are correct. The beauty of English is that there are so many ways to help someone. Your goal as a learner is to understand all of these variations when you hear them. I want to talk briefly about listening for hedging. Hedging is when we soften our language to not sound too direct. In English advice, we often use words like maybe, perhaps, a little bit, or slightly. For example, instead of saying, change your hair, a friend might say, maybe you could change your hair a little bit? Or instead of, move to a new house, they might say, perhaps you might think about moving. When you hear these softening words, it tells you that the speaker is being very careful not to offend you. They are giving you a suggestion that you can easily ignore if you want to. It is polite and indirect. If you are watching a movie or listening to a podcast, pay attention for these little words. They change the meaning of the advice from a command to a humble opinion. Let's imagine one more conversation before we move to our final scenarios. We have a brother and sister, Peter and Kate. Peter wants to ask his boss for a raise, but he is very nervous. Kate is helping him practice. Peter is pacing around the room. He says, "What if he says no? What if he fires me?" Kate stops him and says, "Peter, you need to calm down. You really should focus on your achievements. You have done a great job this year." Kate is giving him emotional advice and practical advice combined. She says, "It might be a good idea to write down a list of your projects before you go into the meeting. That way, you won't forget anything." Peter takes a deep breath and says, "That is a smart idea." Kate continues, "And you could try practicing what you want to say with me. I can pretend to be your boss." Peter laughs and agrees. This role-play idea is a very common piece of advice. Notice the phrase, "you can pretend." It is permissive and helpful. Peter feels much more ready after talking to Kate. This shows how advice can turn anxiety into action. As we continue to practice these skills, remember that listening is an active process. You are not just hearing sounds, you are interpreting meaning, intention, and emotion. When someone gives advice, they are sharing their experience with you. They are trying to help you navigate a problem. By understanding the specific phrases they use, you can understand exactly how much they care and how strongly they feel about the solution. Whether it is a casual "why not" or a serious "you had better," each phrase tells a story. Now, we are going to look at a few more specific situations to really round out your understanding. Let's start with a situation involving a lost item. This happens to everyone, right? You lose your keys, your phone, or your wallet, and you panic. We are going to listen to a conversation between Grace and Henry. Grace is running around her living room, looking very stressed. She has lost her bank card, and she is worried that someone might steal her money. Henry is trying to help her stay calm. Listen closely to the order of his advice. Grace says, "I don't know where it is. I think I left it at the supermarket, but I am not sure." Henry puts his hand on her shoulder to stop her from running around. He says, "Grace, please take a deep breath. The first thing you should do is call the bank and cancel the card. That is the most important step." Notice the phrase, the first thing you should do. This is great for prioritizing advice when someone is overwhelmed. It tells them exactly where to start. Grace agrees and calls the bank. After she finishes the call, she feels a bit better, but she is still upset about losing the card. Henry says, "Now that is done, you had better check your bag pockets one more time. Sometimes things hide in the lining." He uses "you had better" here because he thinks it is a very sensible, practical thing to do. Grace checks the bag, but finds nothing. Henry then suggests, "Why don't you call the supermarket customer service desk? They might have a lost and found box." Again, we hear "why don't you" as a helpful suggestion. Grace calls the store, and guess what? They have her card. She is so relieved. She thanks Henry, and he smiles and says, "You ought to be more careful next time, but I am glad we found it." Henry uses "you ought to be" to give a gentle warning for the future. It is his way of saying, "Please be careful," without sounding angry. Now, let's move to a different kind of problem. This time, we have two cousins, Olivia and Daniel. Olivia is feeling very lonely because she recently moved to a new city and hasn't made any friends yet. She is telling Daniel this over the phone. She says that she spends every weekend watching TV alone, and she is starting to feel depressed. Daniel is a very positive person, and he has a lot of ideas. Listen to how enthusiastic he is. Daniel says, "Olivia, you can't just sit at home waiting for people to knock on your door. You need to put yourself out there." The phrase, "put yourself out there," is an idiom that means you need to make an effort to meet people or take risks. Olivia sighs and says she doesn't know how to meet people because she is shy. Daniel says, "I completely understand, but if I were you, I would join a local club. You love painting, don't you? You could join an art class." He links her interests to his advice, which makes it much more appealing. Olivia says that sounds scary, but maybe doable. Daniel continues, "Also, it might be a good idea to download an app to meet people with similar hobbies. Lots of people make friends that way these days." He is offering a modern solution. Olivia agrees to look into it. Then Daniel adds, "And whatever you do, don't give up. It takes time to build a friendship. You should give it a few months." He uses "don't give up" and "give it a few months" to manage her expectations. This is emotional advice. It is about patience and perseverance. By the end of the call, Olivia feels hopeful because she has a concrete plan. She realizes that making friends is a process, and Daniel has given her the first steps. Let's look at one more scenario involving technology. We often need advice about gadgets and computers because they can be confusing. We have two students, Lucas and Sophie. Lucas is trying to buy a new laptop for university, but there are too many options and he is confused by the technical terms. He is in the electronics store with Sophie. He points to a very expensive, shiny laptop and says he wants to buy that one. Sophie, who is good with computers, stops him. She says, "Wait a minute, Lucas. That one is way too powerful for what you need. You would be wasting your money." She is giving strong advice based on facts. She says, "You really ought to consider this smaller model. It is lighter, which is better for carrying to class, and it is much cheaper." Lucas looks worried and says, "But is it fast enough?" Sophie laughs and says, "Yes, definitely. You should focus on battery life instead of speed. For writing essays and browsing the web, this is perfect. Trust me, I have the same one." Notice the phrase, "trust me." This is used when you want the person to believe you because you have experience. It adds weight to the advice. Lucas trusts Sophie, so he agrees. Sophie adds one final tip. You might want to buy a protective case as well, just in case you drop it. Just in case is a wonderful phrase for giving preventative advice. It means you do something now to avoid a problem later. Lucas buys the laptop and the case, feeling happy that he saved money and got the right advice. By now, your ears are probably tuned in to the rhythm of these conversations. You can probably hear the difference between a suggestion and a command. But before we finish, I want to give you a final listening challenge. I am going to tell you a short story about a woman named Mary and her nephew, Tom. I want you to listen to this story and count how many different pieces of advice Mary gives to Tom. Are you ready? Here we go. It is a sunny Sunday morning, and Mary is in the garden planting flowers. Her young nephew, Tom, comes outside looking very grumpy. He tells his aunt that he failed his math test and he is scared to show his parents. Mary puts down her gardening trowel and wipes her hands on her apron. She looks at Tom kindly and says, "Oh, Tom, I am sorry to hear that. But hiding the truth is not the answer. You really should tell them as soon as possible." Tom shakes his head and says he is too afraid. Mary thinks for a moment and says, "I understand your fear, but if I were in your shoes, I would explain that I studied hard, but found the test difficult. They will appreciate your honesty." Tom looks down at his feet. Mary continues, "Why don't you offer to study extra hard for the next test? That shows them you want to improve." Tom mumbles that he hates studying. Mary smiles and suggests, "It might be a good idea to ask your cousin Sarah for help. She is very good at math, and she can explain it in a way you understand." Tom's face lights up a little bit. He says he didn't think of asking Sarah. Mary adds, "And you had better not wait until after dinner. Tell them now while they are in a good mood." Tom takes a deep breath, nods his head, and walks back into the house to face his parents. Did you catch all the advice Mary gave? Let's count them together. First, she told him he really should tell them soon. Second, she said, "If I were in your shoes, I would explain." Third, she asked, "Why don't you offer to study?" Fourth, she said, "It might be a good idea to ask your cousin." And fifth, she said, "You had better not wait until after dinner." That was 5 different pieces of advice in just one short conversation. See how natural it flows? In real life, people often give a stream of advice like that, mixing different phrases. Your goal is to follow the flow without getting lost. As we come to the end of this B1 English listening practice session, I want to remind you that becoming a good listener takes time. You are not going to understand every word in every conversation immediately, and that is okay. Even native speakers sometimes miss things or ask people to repeat themselves. The most important thing is that you catch the key phrases like "you should," "why don't you," and "if I were you." These phrases act like anchors. They hold the conversation together and help you understand the main message, even if you miss a few small details. I encourage you to take the situations we discussed today and try to act them out with a friend, or even by yourself in front of a mirror. Say the lines out loud. Pretend you are Tom giving advice to Sarah, or Sophie helping Lucas with the laptop. When you speak the words, you train your brain to recognize them instantly when you hear them. It connects your speaking and listening skills, which makes you a much more well-rounded English speaker. It builds that fluency that we are always talking about here on the channel. Always remember that English is not just about grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It is about people communicating, helping each other, and sharing their lives. When you understand advice-giving language, you are understanding the heart of human interaction. You are learning how to support others and how to accept support. That is a beautiful thing. So, keep practicing, keep listening to English podcasts, watch English movies with subtitles, and try to have real conversations with English speakers as often as you can. I also want to give you a small homework assignment. Don't worry, it is fun. I want you to think of a problem you have right now, something small. Maybe you can't decide what to cook for dinner, or maybe you are trying to save money for a trip. I want you to ask yourself, what would Alex say? Or, what would my friend say? Try to give yourself advice using the phrases we practiced. Say it out loud. If I were me, I should cook pasta because it is cheap. It might be a good idea to put $50 in my savings account every week. Getting used to the sound of these sentences in your own mouth will make it so much easier to recognize them when someone else says them to you. Thank you so much for joining me today for this long and detailed lesson. I hope you found it helpful and that you feel more confident in your ability to follow helpful conversations. If you liked this video and found it helpful, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps us make more content for you, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me about a time when someone gave you great advice, or maybe try writing a sentence using one of the phrases we learned today. Practice makes perfect, and I am here to help you every step of the way. You guys are amazing, and I am so proud of your dedication to learning. Keep going, stay positive, and remember that every conversation you listen to makes you stronger. I am Alex, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and keep practicing your English. Bye for now.